This is the Caucasian Sasquatch Show. Welcome to Sasquatch Says, where Sasquatch speaks and nobody cares. All right. So we're here today with Kans Quatch, an individual who is a naturalist, a hiker, a filmer. He produces content for YouTube. He makes videos largely about his hiking adventures and where he goes, what he does, and he likes to, well, follow the general Bigfoot community, as far as I can tell. He's got some really neat videos about some of his trips. They're about what you'd expect from somebody that spends a good deal of time in the woods, looking at animals, different stuff, and he might be willing to discuss a little bit about his collection of footwear, footprints, foot marks, foot casts. I'm sure one of those apply. So let's bring him in and let him have a swing at it. See how we all get along. Famously, assuming that I can find the right button. Hey,
there we go.
Oh, that was the wrong one. Let's try this one. Yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Yeah, I was looking at my computer trying to get the show on YouTube also, seeing if you were live on there. So I was trying to get that. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I saw you in Mongolian Monsters channel. You were looking for a guest and thought somebody else would jump at the chance. So nobody really did right off the bat. So I went ahead and took you up on your offer. So I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yes, sir. You've got all the requirements, some subs, some videos on YouTube.
Right. Yeah. I kind of like what you're doing with kind of highlighting some of the people that are just putting out a little bit of content, don't have many subscribers like myself, but have an enthusiasm to bring a little bit more content, especially within the context where I'm at in eastern Kansas, kind of showing, like you had mentioned, kind of the hiking, some of the natural, not wonders, but just kind of a reflection of what eastern Kansas looks like. We've got some of the river bottoms, what most of my hikes kind of revolve around, and some ridges around some of the lakes there. Also, kind of within a Bigfoot context. I haven't found anything within eastern Kansas, but as my content shows, I also travel over to Kentucky. I've been to New Mexico. I don't think I've got any of the things that I've got from Colorado on there, but anyway, I travel around checking out different areas that are kind of known for their Bigfoot activity, like the land between the lakes in Kentucky. I think I showed recently there in April some of the different ridges that you can hike up and down, just kind of the thickness of the forest there, where a group I had
It's
been
beautiful.
with. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's from coming from Kansas, where everything's pretty flat, and going to some of the ridges and hollows that you can see at the land between the lakes is just amazing. Old growth forest, amazing pine trees, old growth oaks. Um, it's kind of a magical place, really. Plus, had some success with finding some footprints there with the group that I'm kind of a part of that uses that area pretty frequently as an area that they um, go out to make some calls. I've had some responses there. There's a recent video on my channel that shows a spectrograph um, of a response to a call just back in, just last month. And that kind of shows that it wasn't canine, wasn't human. It's kind of an unidentified call. Not saying it's definitely, Sasquatch or Bigfoot. It was just kind of curious that those are the type of responses you can get when you go there.
Right.
But that's just kind of in a nutshell. What my channel is about is really just getting out, showing what's on my hikes. I come across a lot of deer, some armadillos, um, uh, owls. I think there's a video that you were going to talk about that has to do with some barred owls that I came across this spring. Just a variety of waterfowl. Also, it's a national wildlife refuge, and I've seen thousands of snow geese, Canadian geese this past spring. Didn't get them on film, but I saw 6 trumpeter swans, and that's pretty rare in the area in Central Flyway. It's very rare. So it's just yeah. So it's not a lot of people out there. So you know it's just nice to get out there away from the city, away from the suburbs, and get out in nature and just kind of relax. Really get away from
That's,
things.
that is awesome. I really dig your videos, especially the ones you have where you're coming across the different like animal sounds and stuff out in nature. Because I'm from the South, we get a lot of like really weird noises and sounds when you're out in the swamps and the deep woods around here. There's some places that have never been cut, and sometimes you get some stuff out there that you can't identify what is, and it may take many years for you to figure it out exactly. And I learned the hard way that like a bobcat mating sounds
Mm,
like people being murdered. Sounds like a woman being murdered or a baby being murdered or something like
right.
that. Like they sound heinous. And we generally don't figure this out unless we just happen to stumble across one, you know, unless we just
Yeah.
happen to see it happening or you come across a recording of it or something along those lines, you wouldn't know. Uh, a I come across a goose with a damaged larynx, and that thing made the most atrocious call you could possibly imagine. I can't even describe it. It was not a goose. It
Yeah.
was certainly not a goose, but it was a goose. It was a goose with a damaged throat or something. If you'll type in the actual YouTube chat, I can mod you. You can post whatever links you like.
I'm checking out your channel and I can't see anything live. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Um, well, have you heard what a fox sounds like? Sometimes the sounds that foxes make.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
yeah,
those are
we have.
eerie, screaming.
It's not. It's no nothing like a dog, and it's nothing like a wolf, and it's nothing like a cat. None of that fits.
Right. In fact, we had a bobcat last time I was at Land Between the Lakes, just back there in October. I think the second weekend of October, we had a bobcat come up on our camp at night, and we ended up getting that on FLIR as it walked away from the camp. We saw its eye shine and kind of went after it that way, and we had FLIR, and people were recording it. So there's in fact, I think there might be a show on tonight that might be going over some of that film at
Oh, that's
8 o'clock Central. Yeah,
yeah. So that'd be about time we're coming off.
right, right.
In theory, I mean, give or take a few minutes. What show do you have any? Do you know who's doing that?
That'll be actually that'll be on Beast of the Woods, which is
That's
Larry
good.
Porch.
Okay, is that if
He
that's great. No, I've seen him before.
right,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
he
can
does
post that in chat.
interesting. It
Yeah,
might take you a minute to be able to drop a link in there. I don't know. Yeah, okay, there you go.
they yeah
I got just a
Mark and
minute.
Larry has the channel Beast of the Woods, and Mark he has the channel Sawdust Beast, which is on Thursday nights. He got a Monday night show and a Thursday night show that's all around Bigfoot.
Right,
Um, they're both from Tennessee, and they primarily, I mean, they've been all over to see different areas for research. Daniel Boone National Forest, uh, the res out in New Mexico, out in Farmington, New Mexico. That's where I met Mark. Um, they've been down to Texas. They've been to Arkansas. They've been to Missouri. They've been to Florida. Kentucky, Georgia, Mississippi, or maybe not Mississippi, Louisiana. They've been all over, all over. And Larry even has a significant other who has their own female uh, Bigfoot group called Sisters of the Moon. In fact,
Yeah,
they were just up.
that. I think I may have found that in your channel. Actually, I was looking around and I was looking for other people with like smaller channels.
I don't think they have a channel. They're kind of anti
There's
channel.
something there
Well, there may be one on some interviews with them.
that might
I
have been
know
what I
they'll,
saw. I
they'll show
saw
up if you
something
do a
about
search. But they were
sisters.
actually in northern Georgia, kind of in your neck of the woods,
Yes, sir.
just in August, in the North Georgia mountains, to an area that they frequent, and they had activity, the live streaming on YouTube, or no, on Facebook, where something was throwing stuff into their camp, throwing you know uh,
Wasn't me.
pebbles. Yeah, but they did run into a guy that was camping out there who was like had a sword. It was like some yeah.
That
Uh,
wasn't me neither.
yeah, yeah. You can run into. That's another thing about when you're out in the woods. You can always run into some strange people. Most of the time, you don't run into Bigfoot, but you may run into some strange people. That's for sure. But I'm gonna put Sawdust Beast, which is another channel that's all surrounding Bigfoot. Gets great interviews with some of the biggest people in the community.
That's cool.
Um, all different views. We had talked before the show a little bit about the different, um, I guess, camps within the Bigfoot community. There's some people that kind of think it's a supernatural
Cover
being.
that. Let's cover that
There,
for a second because
there's people that are more physical,
I
right?
was talking to Harry about you about having you on a couple of days ago, and I was having trouble trying to like hammer down exactly what to consider your channel and a nature channel, a hiking channel, a travel channel of sorts. You kind of go around and film nature in all its glory. I really like that butterfly one.
Yeah,
That's some pretty butterflies, man. You got a bunch of them in one shot.
that
Amazing.
was that was one of the that honestly, that's one of the magical things that kind of happens at LBL. You don't get an opportunity to see something like that anymore. I mean, monarchs are really kind of down in their population, and that was the breed. That was a stop along the way in the breeding. I mean, that was as interesting as seeing other migrations of different animals. That just happened to be in the springtime, right there in a puddle on a campground.
Yeah.
That was that was pretty amazing to shoot it, and it doesn't even give the real richness and the quality of what it was like sitting there in an April morning in 65-degree weather, perfect weather, no breeze, and just watching these butterflies just float around you, and not just like them being totally oblivious to you. I mean, I like walked up within a couple feet of them filming them,
Yeah, you
and they were
got
just
real close.
yeah, they were totally oblivious. And it's kind of a play also because LBL is supposed to be Land Between the Lakes. There's a big legend there about dogmen, about this dog man werewolf creature that
I'm working
attacked a
on
fan.
putting a dog man guy in here. I really am. He's sketchy. They're all those dog men people are real sketchy about talking on anybody's channel. They just know it's going to be I gotcha, right?
Yeah,
And that's not what
yeah.
I'm doing here. I just like
And I
meeting
mean,
people. I like talking to them.
there's a lot of people that I mean, you can't fault or look down on anybody's experience because you weren't there and you don't know what they saw.
Exactly.
I mean, there's people that have described essentially an animal with a canine head, and not just a snout type of maybe bear looking or prolonged pronounced, you know, uh, like a oh uh, oh
Muzzle.
hyena. like nothing like nothing like that, but more really like a big German Shepherd or something like that. So um,
You know what that would be called in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons? A knoll or a fleend.
oh yeah,
It's a big old dog man. That's perfect description of it right there. Perfect.
all right.
There.
Well, there's definitely there's definitely channels out there about that too.
Yeah, Dark Waters is a real good one. He's
Dark,
huge. Dark
yes.
Waters, yeah. And I can't remember Sean the Truth. I think that's the
Uh,
channel, Sean the Truth.
the
He
out of
covers a lot of this stuff, but he also covers other stuff. So it's not
yeah,
just
Dark Waters is pretty on the straight and narrow as far as giving you the good
gives you the straight dose.
encounters. Right,
Yeah,
right,
it's not a whole bunch of BS around the edges. And in a few of his interviews, he'll get a little bit pointed about his questions, wanting to know, how long was his hair? How long was his teeth? Did he have any flop ears? How many spots did he have? That kind of stuff. And I
right.
dig that kind of thing. And that's not
Well,
quite my flavor, but
and it
that's
kind of
his
and it
story.
goes back to kind of what the I was talking about within community as far as the Bigfoot community about credibility, about how you
Hmm.
see on my channel. I don't say anything definite about what I'm finding or what I'm coming across because I haven't found anything definite or conclusive.
I haven't either. I just saw a thing. That's it.
Well, I tell you um, what you described to me is not unlike what other people have described within their encounters. Um,
That's kind of one of the reasons why I'll listen to all the Bigfoot sightings and the Sasquatch sightings and the Wendigo sightings and dogmen sightings and the bearmen sightings and the pigmen sightings and all that stuff.
Goat man,
And
don't
listen
forget
to
the
it.
goat man,
Goat man, can't forget the goat man, Mothman. We can go
right?
further.
Mothman,
We go
lizard
fairies and
man,
elves. I'm not against it. You know,
lizard man,
Man,
always.
those things terrify me. I come across one. I think it was on Dark Waters. I'm not positive it was on Dark Waters, but I think it was one of the early interviews he did with somebody. It was a mail in, like somebody mailed him a stack of papers, and he sat down and read through them. And what this guy recounted reminded me of the first time I came across an alligator in a weird way, except for what this thing was doing was seemingly hurting the boat in a specific direction until he
Interesting.
realized he was being hurted and just got on his motor and left. Like, screw that. I can't say as I blame him, but I have a theory about all that. And I'll shoot it across for you. There are two things that you almost never hear when it comes to these types of encounters. Direct violence against an individual is rare. And while there are tales of damaging property or damaging trees or throwing rocks, it rarely actually encounters in a way that would injure a person. So, my theory is this: these creatures, assuming they exist, these creatures have no desire to harm a person. They want your food. You're fishing, you're hunting, you've got a little pack of supplies with you, and they want to rattle you enough to get you to leave whatever you got behind so they can rifle through it and eat it while you're gone. Usually you go back, try to find it, your bag's torn all to pieces, your shit strode all down the river, and you pick up the bits that aren't edible and everything else is gone, and you assume an animal got it. Well, some sort of animal got it, but there's a few of them where they had their stuff locked up in a zippered pouch with a little padlock on it, and they ripped the padlock off to get into it. That's not exactly animal behavior. you
Exactly.
know there's
Exactly.
there's a few of them that are like that. And the more I think about it and the more I listen to the encounters, the more I firmly believe some of these things, whatever they might actually be, parallel dimension beings or aliens, trolls, freaking woolly boogers, whatever they are, hobos in a fur coat,
Yeah.
whatever it is, you know, they're just they're hungry, and you've got better food than they can find in the water. It's
Well,
tasty.
well, and that kind of cuts against the supernatural kind of view also is because it's like if it's flesh and blood, it's got to eat, right?
Hmm.
So if it's interdimensional, and go through all these different portals and whatever, and then it's like, then the argument is like, well, why would it need to? Why doesn't it just manifest some food around itself? Why does it need to, be chasing any deer or anything like
Who
that if it's
says anything
interdimensional?
about magic, man? I mean, paradimensional beings wouldn't necessarily need magic to travel from one location to another. It might be. You ever read the Long Earth series?
No, I haven't. No, I
It was
haven't.
written by Terry Pratchett and I want to say Scott somebody. I can't remember who the other author was, but it's all about parallel dimensions of Earth and how in the series the protagonists of the series are initially the people that are traveling to these other dimensions until they come across these various beings, dogmen, Bigfoot, uh, proto humans, hominids, and all of these creatures have the ability of stepping, is what they call it when you go to another dimension. And other dimensions are virtually identical to this one, except maybe humans didn't evolve there. Maybe the asteroid didn't hit and there's dinosaurs running around, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it's an interesting read. There's a whole bunch of them too. If you don't like one, just go to the next one.
Well,
They're
there's
all a little
there's
different.
that's part of what we had, when you were talking about the different views. I mean, there are. I mean, nobody really knows anything definite within the Bigfoot community because essentially nothing has been
Let
proven
me, let me correct that a
scientifically
little.
to the standards
No
that
one, no one who hasn't witnessed knows anything definite. Once you see something like that, you yourself can be sold completely, but you'll never convince another man.
absolutely right.
You know,
So
so
from a scientific standpoint, the standards
right.
that we have today, they need a body as far as to prove its existence. And there's even a division within the Bigfoot community about, do we really want to, what kind of group are you? Are you a kill, no kill group? I mean, I think the majority of people don't want to kill this animal if it's some type of being. It's
For
another.
many years, I thought I was a kill on sight. If I saw Bigfoot, I'd prove he existed because I'd kill him and I'd feel bad about it, but then we could protect them and we could set aside land for them. And you can't do it. You can't kill a man. You can't do that. If you're out hunting animals, it doesn't look like an animal.
Right.
It's
And
not
that's
an
what
animal.
most of the hunters that have had right, exactly, that have
It's got
had
thumbs.
that have had a Bigfoot in his sights. A lot of you know hunters are like, I can't shoot this, number one, because I'm not going to eat it, but number two, that looks too much like a human. It's
Right.
it's it's and then they're thinking, if I shoot this and it is proven to be something that's human or a human, then you can be charged with murder. Um,
Right. What if it was a hobo in a fur coat?
yeah, where
That's
somebody's
murder.
joking around. I mean, and
Right.
that's another thing. It's like, who would be out joking around during deer season, running around in a gorilla suit or a Bigfoot costume?
110 degrees.
They're risking their life to be shot by the person who thinks that they're going to be the next
Uh,
millionaire that brings the Bigfoot to the world. So
Well, I mean, I went and got me a gorilla suit at one point in time. Was going to do just that very thing, and my pops took it and left with it, and I never saw it again. Like I literally walked in, said it. I was like, "Look what I got." He said, "Cool," and walked out the door with it. I have no idea what happened to it, but eh,
Well, I'm dropping some more links in here of some just other kind of
yeah,
enthusiast channels where
go
you
for it.
can go. Sometimes you can hear some encounters. Other times you can just go along with people hiking through the woods in their areas. I got some people from Missouri on here that are pretty close to me, that you can kind of see what the southern Missouri looks like down around Bull Shoals. Um,
Well, freaky geek, I don't happen to have any sleeping darts in my pocket. I just don't happen to have any. I mean, if I did, I might have popped that shot. I'd have known for a fact that there was a chance it wouldn't be murder. But what I saw, it couldn't. Uh.
yeah, from what you described, it sounded
I
more
could have stood
more
up and walked
human.
away like a grown man. Looked like a European footballer. I mean, I was, I was just flummoxed. I don't know what a naked guy with a fur coat on was running around in the Georgia woods for in the middle of summer, but okay. I never said I saw Bigfoot. I saw a hairy guy in the middle of the woods naked and severely uncircumcised.
I think he said it was a hobo in a fur coat though.
That's what I told Pops, and that's what I told everybody else was there's a hobo in a fur coat out there. Don't shoot him.
Now, could you see what the hands looked like when it was
Yeah,
drinking
right
water?
right before he noticed me there, he reached to the back of his head and scratched. And I saw the back of his hand, and I saw a thumb, a distinct thumb with a slightly abbreviated end digit right there. But the rest of it was just perfectly normal. Maybe a little bit of long fingers, but nothing outside of the human norm. Maybe 6'5". He was a little bigger than me. He might have been a buck 80, buck 90. Not a giant, not a massive Bigfoot, 7.5 foot tall. He wasn't hugely furred and all that stuff. He was a lightly downy, kind of haired individual with a sort of calico kind of dappled light and shadow on pine straw.
Interesting.
He was not blonde. He was not dark. He was not red. He was not orange. He was turtle shell or tortoise shell, like a cat. If he had stopped moving on pine straw, I'd have lost him. But where I was at, there was nothing but sand down there. So, I mean, he went up to where he blended in with the trees and was gone. And I was like, I wonder if I just saw Pee Wee, or I wonder if I just saw one of the other hunters out here for some reason, and he was running around naked. I got a cousin named Steven. It could have been him, except he's short. Big, hairy, burly guy, except he's a little short, you know.
Could you see what the fingernails look like at all?
No, I wasn't quite that close. I was about 25, maybe 30 feet away. And he reached back. And I don't know if you've ever seen a woman scratch her hair with a wig on. You know, they do that weird little rock. That's kind of what he did. It was like that. I don't know how to explain it. He stuck his fingernail into his scalp and wiggled his hand back and forth real fast. And for a split second, I saw thumbs that weren't quite right. The rest of it looked perfectly human. Maybe 6'3", maybe 180 pounds. Really smooth gait. Home cuz all but levitated up over those little cypress trees and stuff.
That's what you said.
He just kind of hopped over them like they weren't even there, like he was perfectly used to that. Something that I would have had to take a little bit of effort to get over. He just kind of right up through it. No problem.
Yeah.
Dude, I was just
you got to think their fast twitch muscle fibers are probably, times 10 compared to a human. So it'd almost be like, I mean, this sounds weird, but can you imagine what a 7-foot squirrel would move like? You know how you watch a squirrel in your backyard and it's jumping around and it's zipping and moving real quick, really quick. Exactly. I mean, think about an animal that could do that's like 7 to 10 feet tall. If it moved that fast.
Was not the movement, was not the fact that I just saw a big hairy naked guy in the woods. That shook me a little bit. It was the look on his face that I had gotten so close because I was out creeping, hunting rabbits. I was looking for anything that was coming to the water to come drink. I was hunting. Right. And so I was moving quietly, and I've grown up in that swamp my whole life. And I know how to creep around in there, and I know how to not leave any sign of presence or anything like that. And I was creeping. But the very second I laid eyes on him, I thought, wow, there's a bear. No, there's a pig. Wait. And I think I may have said something under my breath like, who the hell are you? Or what the hell are you doing? Or something like that. But I don't think I said it loud enough to be heard. And he looks over his shoulder back at me with this look like, damn. Kind of rolled his eyes.
I thought you said that he was drinking water and you were kind of concerned that he was drinking water. So you're like, hey, you shouldn't drink that.
Right. There was this moment where I hadn't said nothing and he was sitting there drinking. And I was like, that's not safe. It was just not a thought of statement, just something that came out of my mouth without thinking about it. Like, you shouldn't do that. That's not right. People don't do that.
Right.
And just the very beginning of the statement, he looks over over his shoulder, and it just died in my mouth. Like I don't even think I finished saying it because those eyes are not an animal. That face was not an animal. That was not an animal, except that it matches all of the description of what these other people are talking about, with the exception of size. So a
Well,
younger
what did
one,
it?
perhaps.
What about the nose? What did the nose and the eyes look like?
The nose was basically just a little bit smushed. It was almost human, except not quite. Kind of turned up a little bit and not quite as long. You know,
Right.
kind of wide, kind of pulled out wide. It just didn't stick. It wasn't right. But I want to reiterate, this guy was a shave and a bikini wax away from voting.
Right.
Whatever it was, if he had walked in and signed his name on a piece of paper, they'd have gave him a ballot. Can't shoot that. That's murder.
Well, the look that you said, the kind of, the kind of
Yeah, just
forlorn, or the oh crap look at you. That's
yeah.
common. That's common for a lot of encounters that people have. Like the Bigfoot is somehow uh, d- like bummed out he got caught, that he's been seen, or a lot of times when people catch him and they're looking directly in their eyes, like the look on their face is like, just as scared and like, oh shit, kind of look back at the
I wouldn't
person
say
that's seeing them.
scared. My man looked like he was disappointed in himself.
Right.
That was more of the thing. Like, well, damn, I got to go
Yeah.
find some other water to drink.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things is what tipped me off that he was there is he was flicking the surface of the water as if he was trying to get something off the surface so he could drink underneath it or whatever. He was just it, and that's what made me go that way. I heard the splash, and he was like, "Damn, I shouldn't have splashed the water." Well, I'm leaving. He was like, "Thunk, thunk, 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 gone." And I walked away and I ran into one of my neighbors on the way back to the house. And he's like, dude, you look like you've seen a ghost. I said, nope, just a hobo in a fur coat. And that's been my story ever since.
So he said that. He said you look like he's seen a
Yeah.
ghost.
He said, I looked like I'd seen something. You know, looked like you've seen a ghost. Cause I imagine I did have a fairly shocked look on my face because I literally put my gun on my back, stuck my hands in my pockets, and walked all the way back to all 2.5 miles back to the house, just staring at the ground and not really paying attention to anything around me because if that thing hadn't come at me, I really didn't believe anything else would. I don't know. I was just stuck inside my head for a minute.
I'm
I had to
sure.
consider
It's
it, you know. It's
a lot of
shaking
people.
my
A
concept of
lot of
people.
people throws them for a loop. Gives a whole
Yep.
new perspective to what's out there.
So now I'm pushing the Sasquatch vote, you know.
Well, it's a good community. I mean, the majority of people out there. I mean, you can
That's
find
true.
people that are interested in this subject. Some of the nicest people I've come across. That's for sure. Met some really good friends. And there's kind of the downside too. There's a lot of backbiting sometimes about what sometimes people present as evidence. People put pictures out there that are borderline at what you can find in them, what you can see in them, and they can get made fun of or whatever. But then that kind of discourages anybody else from trying to put out any evidence that they might come across. And I think then I think there's some great evidence out there that has never been shown, and I don't think we'll ever see YouTube, never see
Freaky got it.
Facebook, never
Freaky Geek's
see.
got it figured out. He said his cloaking device malfunctioned. I can't remember who the dude was. I think it was like Hedwig, I think is the comedian's name. He's like, I'm convinced there's a large, blurry, hairy guy out there. He's
Right,
just
right,
naturally blurry. That's why nobody can get a picture of him.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
brilliant. That was one of the greatest jokes I ever heard about Bigfoot. It's great.
Well,
Mm.
there has been some samples of hair that's been found, that's been looked at. I know there's a channel. Oh, I can't remember the name of the channel, but it's Mark Zasky down in Florida, and he's gotten some pretty good photos too. I mean, he's got some of the better photos that aren't blurry that are out there. um, and he's got some hair in under the microscope and a little bit of analysis to show that it's kind of hollow, almost.
Unidentified primate. I remember I saw part of that video. It came back as an unidentified mammal of primate descent. Something they couldn't quite place, but wasn't human and wasn't chimp and wasn't gorilla and wasn't orangutan and wasn't this and wasn't that. But it's
Well, I
not
think
none
in
of
most of the DNA, and don't quote me on this because I'm not really an expert on some of that DNA evidence. There's been a few different samples that have been submitted. Some have, supposedly been contaminated or whatever. But yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that that's most of the results. But with this hair, it comes back as kind of hollow to where it kind of absorbs light.
Mhm.
So a lot of times it's just blending in with the surroundings that may make it seem like it's cloaked. In my opinion, I don't think this thing is disappearing and
This
necessarily
guy,
walking into a portal.
if this guy had been standing in oak leaves or pine trees or anything natural, if it had not been a completely sandy, white, sandy area, and like I said, we don't get a whole lot of sand around here like that. We're in a clay country. If it had not been white sand that he was standing in and red clay that he was standing in front of, I might not have seen him.
Right.
I completely missed him. If he'd have been 2 foot to the right, 2 foot to the left, but I just happened to catch him with his back turned and a full rear look, and it just befuddled me. I was like,
Well, I
that's
think
not
there's,
safe.
I think, I mean, if you look in your backyard, sometimes heck, a rabbit or a squirrel that's up against a tree or a bunch of leaves, if it doesn't move, you don't, I mean, you can just see how it blends in like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's
Cats.
even something. There's one on my channel, I think, where I'm like filming a cloaking deer or something.
Yeah, I brought
And
that. I think I got that.
essentially, it's just it's blended in so much with its background that you can't see it until I focus, zoom in on it, then you see it. And that happens all the time. But yeah, that that's kind of a. There's so many weird facets and sub genres to the Bigfoot community that dipping your toe into it and just checking out some channels where there's some good encounters is probably a good place for most people just to kind of get familiar with what's going on, because there's, I mean, like Sasquatch Chronicles. I mean, that's a
That's a
pretty
good
common one where Wes does a pretty good job of vetting a lot of those encounters to make sure that they're truthful, and can't always vouch for everybody, and somebody can get
best
past
I can do is tell you what I saw, and the
right.
fact that the individual, the other person that I told about it early on, before I mentioned it to anyone else, I described what I saw, and he just gave me this big shit-eating grin, and he said, "Well, what are we going to do about him?" I said, "Man, what the hell do you mean, man? There's nothing to do about it. He's got 10,000 acres of freaking swamp to go fuck around in. I'm not doing nothing with it. It's
That's right.
his. Have it. I don't. I never went that far back out there.
Well, yeah, you said it was such a drought that you wouldn't have gotten back there
Horrendous crap. Was
without the
bad.
drought.
You couldn't walk. You today I could go out there in a canoe and we would be 20 foot above the sinkhole that he was dipping water out of. You know, you'd be floating up here instead of on the level of walking.
Right. I
Hmm.
saw a question in chat about the Patterson and Gimlin
Right. I
film,
was going to pop that up.
Bluff Creek. Um, yeah, that's one of the very first things that really got me into the Bigfoot as a kid, was taking a look at the
Is that the
Patterson Gimlin
Patterson
film.
film?
Yeah,
That's the Patterson film, right? Right.
yeah.
Okay.
And you know, I think immediately as I saw that, I was just like, what is that? I mean, I think there's something that's primordial within you that just kind of goes off in your brain that, like, that just doesn't look right. You
Mm,
know, I'm pretty, there's been a lot of different cleanups of that film, stabilization of that film, analyzation of the gait of that animal, how the foot and knee uh,
Yeah, that thing has a really weird walk, whatever it
Right.
is.
How the gait on that is not human in the sense that if that was a person in the suit, um, there's certain things that would have to happen to make it look out of proportion. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Big Fur. Um, that was all about taxidermy, but it also kind of shot off into a little genre about the recreation of putting taxidermists in charge of putting together a model of what Patty would look like. And he just he was just interviewed on another channel, Bigfoot Truth, I think, um, or no, Squatch Talk.
Oh, I was
That's
going
kind
to
of
use
that's
that name. Somebody already got there before me. I
Yeah.
was,
Well, Squatch Talk's good
this
because
is,
it's kind of a skeptical channel. They don't they're like, don't I don't believe anything. Bring me evidence.
I'm not
Well,
saying that what I saw was Bigfoot. I've never
right,
said that's not what I'm
right,
saying. I saw a big hairy guy in the woods in a place where you typically cannot go because it's typically under 15 or 20 foot of water.
right. But I was speaking in the context
Right.
of is the Patterson film, or what are my thoughts on that? I think it's probably I'd say 95 to 99% sure that's Bigfoot. Um, there's gaits that we were talking about, the ratio of the way the knee break is compared to how far the foot lifts back from the knee, and is at an angle that humans just don't have. Plus the shoulders. If there was a man in a suit, there wouldn't be the way that
God, that
the
thing
hands
had
hang down to the
massive
side.
shoulders.
Right, exactly. So that's one thing you can't do. You can't space. You can't put in a human. You can't put two spacers in between his shoulders to make him that wide and have his arms hang down like that. And that's what this taxidermist was saying, because essentially he recreates all these different animals. And he was like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "No, that's Bigfoot."
The
So
Patterson film is one of those things I've never been able to look at and disprove in my head. You can say it's a guy in a suit. You can't make a guy in a suit walk that way. You can say
right,
it's a bear, it's a this, it's a that. They don't move that way. They
yeah,
just don't. And trying to fake that film at the time with the technology in the place where it was faked, man, please,
yeah, yeah.
you would need the entire crew from the thing to pull that off.
Well, and plus the area that was at. It's
That's
like,
what
if
I'm
you're going
saying.
to do that, why
Take
hike in
them out there.
so far back in there to do it? Why not just do it right off the road to where a lot of the footprints were found back where Jerry Crew when they were doing that stuff back with the road crew stuff. That was part of the
Mhm.
reason they were up that way. This is way back in there. It's never been disproven. Um, you know, when you see some of these different stabilization shots, a lot of times those aren't the best additions or the true film of what it looks like. If you get a chance to see like the first quality, first print, it's a lot different. You see a lot of like butt cheek, muscle movement, veins in the leg. Um, so, people can have their opinions. They can say it's a man, but a lot of those people, I think, don't want to be convinced anyway. Wouldn't be convinced unless something came up and screamed in their face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listening to a lot of the accounts that I've heard about, I generally take them all with a grain of salt. Most of the time, they're following the program that you hear from other people, whether they've seen something or they haven't, or they just believe they did, or whatever it is. They say things that are said by other people in other circumstances. They seem to be repeating it from a script. When I hear something that goes off script, I start listening, right? Because you hear about the big, shaggy, hairy guy, 7'4", taking huge, long strides with a weird kneecap and all that stuff. Okay, well, that's part of the script, right? Everybody says that. When you get off script, when you get people talking about, well, he hopped with one foot, not both. When he tried to jump over some things, it was like he levitated. It was like he spent no energy to do it. It was just a normal movement for him. Just hop over there. Something that I would have had to take 2 steps to jump. But he's not 3 inches taller than me. He just hopped right over it. I would have had to step up on top of it and step over it. And I was
Yeah.
6 foot at the time. So he was a big fella, but I got a fella staying with me now that's 6'5", and that's about how big he was, except he was a little bit beefier. You know,
Yeah.
European footballer. That's the best description I can give.
Yeah.
Good, healthy specimen of man.
Well,
So,
that's it. Sounded like a juvenile. It sounded like one that was younger because I know the
well,
bigger
it's the only one I ever saw. So,
the older ones, like the alphas, both female and male,
oh,
get to be.
ridge crest, right?
What's that? Yeah, got a
Crest.
sagittal crest on
That's what I
some,
was for. Yeah.
and some don't. There have been other people that talk about looking more human. Other people talk make looking more ape. There's been people talking
Is that
looking
regional?
Neanderthal. What's that?
That's kind of what I was thinking when I first saw it. That's kind of what went through my mind was like maybe a Heidelbergensis or maybe Homo erectus, something along those lines. Except he was a little too big for that. Those
Yeah.
fellers were generally 5'9", 5'10". This guy was 6'3", 6'5", and looked like
Right.
he'd been eating good.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. Smelled like cabbage. Like cabbage that had been
That's
sitting in the freaking sun for 3 or 4 days and then got juicy and nasty and rank.
what
Just
was the consistency of his fur? Was it matted at all, or it looked like it was
no.
taken care of?
He looked like he had been relatively bathed. He had a little bit of goop around his feet, but then again, we were in kind of a juicy area, even though it was really dry. It's usually extremely wet there, you know. I mean, usually it's underwater. So there was little bitty seeps all around the bottoms of the hills where I was walking through next to the creek. Yeah, no, Freaky Geek gets it. That it does. When I hear about skunk ape, the smell of skunk ape,
Mm-hmm.
that's the impression I get. Also, if I'm not mistaken, skunk ape is described as smaller than Sasquatch. Typically,
Little thinner, a little thinner,
thinner, a little narrow. European
right?
football wouldn't be a bad
And
description.
more kind of an orangutan-ish, kind of an orangish color, from what I
Well,
understand. But
he wasn't
I
black,
know that
he wasn't orange, he wasn't blonde, he was somewhere in the middle. So he had
right,
all of that going on. That's why I described it as like a Chewbacca color because it has a
right,
little all that, but the hair wasn't near that long.
right.
It wasn't long enough to be matted. It was just short enough. It looked like, if you got some like a like a fur coat. If you got a little mud on a fur coat, you could just, you know, and most of the mud would
Brushed
come
it
off.
off, right?
Yeah, he didn't look dirty either. That was another thing that kind of made me think it was a hobo in a fur coat was the fact that he wasn't dirty, except he was very very hairy and his fur coat was wrapped around his legs. So I'm not going to discuss that part. I don't really understand it. I
Now,
don't know
had
what
you heard? I'd ask you if you'd heard anything back in those swamps, but did you ever hear
all
anything
kinds of
that's
crazy shit.
like howls? Like, would you think you hear something like
We have
maybe,
screech owls, son. We have owls that will make your fucking blood curdle. And they
right?
live like in the trees in my front yard when I was living out there, man. Those things are crazy sounding. Like death
Anything,
itself coming.
anything that you'd think would be like a Bigfoot howl or a Bigfoot scream or call or
No,
anything
not
like
the
that?
howls.
Okay.
Tree knocks.
Oh yeah.
Tree knocks. There is also another sound that happens that I have not been able to identify. It's like you know what alligators do whenever they're doing their breeding roar? It's
It's almost
like
like an infrasound, kind of like a vibrational sound.
this is very easily heard. It's loud enough, and I haven't been able to really get a good recording of it. I've tried, but like it's like what would happen if you took a bullfrog croaking and stretched it.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
But it's longer and it's deeper and it's more resonant. There's more of it in every direction.
Right, right, right.
Absurdly loud. But if you head towards it, if you go looking for it, it stops. And it stops way the hell over yonder, not when you get close to it. Long before you get there, you head around, you can paddle around out there. And like I said, that whole area is chock full of little bitty islands that might be a half acre or a quarter acre. And, that's just slam full of little spots where if you know where they're at, you could almost wade through the whole swamp. If you don't know where they're at, you will drown. There used to be a rice plantation out there, and
Oh
back,
yeah.
I don't know, 150 years ago, they had these canals and stuff cut, and the beaver dams all broken so that it would drain the area. And there were roads that went from these little island top to island top that were like corduroy roads, like had the
Wow.
limbs laid side by side by side. That was ancient ages ago. And every now and then, if the water's really, really low, you can see a few of the little the support posts that were hammered into the ground, but none of the roads survived. They're the only evidence that the roads are there are the gaps where the trees don't grow.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
It's either a canal or a road. You can't really tell now because it's all underwater. I mean, there's parts in that beaver pond over there next to my pop's house that are, you know, 20 foot deep. There's other parts where you can hop out of a boat and barely get your ankles wet. You know, uh, it's just an ancient landscape that's inundated with beavers and water. So
Yeah,
it's
that'd be
perfect,
interesting to
perfect
look.
environment.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look back on the, I guess, the history of that plantation there. That'd be interesting to see
Uh,
what that was all
Actually,
about.
that's mostly family history for us.
Oh, is it?
Our family was sharecroppers on that plot, and so you go back 150 years, you find a group of other Sasquatches that are my antecedents. Not real Sasquatches, of course, but you know, I don't know,
Sure.
maybe. Maybe they are brethren, maybe they're not. I don't know, but I, like I said, this guy was a bikini wax away from a voting booth. I don't know what to make of it. I always, like I said, I always classified it as a hobo in a fur coat.
Well, did you you talked about the swamp gas that you had back there.
That's cool stuff.
Now did you ever see any balls of light, like
Yeah,
little orbs or anything like that that were
yeah.
like
But the ones I see, they usually dissipate. Like right after you see them, they'll like bubble up, kind of a burst with a little bit of blue light, and then blow away. They just kind of.
oh yeah.
But if there's no wind at all, I mean, it has to be a very still night, a very cold night. You can be sitting out there, and when the cars come by and ride over the top of the hillside, like I don't know, a quarter mile away, there's nothing between here and there to stop the light from shining across the open swamp out there.
Right.
It just lights up everything. And for a little while after the car goes by, there's no shadows. And it is creepy. Creeps. And I used to take people out there to go creep them out, you know. I used to take my friends out there. We'd get all liquored up or juiced up or whatever it was we were doing. Hey, it's ATL. How you doing, brother? Cool. We're doing a totally different subject tonight, brother. We're completely off the reservation. In fact, I want to do a conspiracy stream here in a couple of weeks. I got to get me a tinfoil tricorn hat for that one. You know, captain's hat.
That would be perfect. Yeah,
Right?
there's big conspiracy about the Men in Black and Bigfoot too. So there's
Oh yeah. No, I've been looking into a lot of that here recently.
good. There you go.
Because, you know, that's just
And
interesting.
that
True or not,
seems to be what happens if anybody shoots one. It seems to be that
they show
uh,
up.
they show up, or you call Fish and Game, and Fish and Game has a special number to call, and then somebody shows up in some unmarked cars, and
Explains that you didn't shoot a Bigfoot and it was
it was a
light from
bear.
Venus
Yeah,
through a gas
it was a
cloud on a balloon or something.
it was a bear, and yeah, I mean, there's been crazy stuff that people talking about. You know, their bank accounts have been all messed up. They lose their jobs. Um, you know,
I wasn't exactly excited about talking about my experience 15, 20 years ago when it happened. 20,
no, oh,
30
there are
years
people that take a
ago.
long time
And I
to.
still, like I've said every time, I've never said that I saw big. No, I saw a hairy dude in the swamp in a fur coat.
Drinking,
Out of the fucking
drinking
medlock hole,
water,
yeah.
scratching his hairy head,
Mhm.
no pants on, walking up almost a vertical incline like no
Yep,
human being
yep.
could.
I couldn't go up it without some maybe some help, maybe.
That hobo had been working out, man.
Yeah, he was strapped, son, but he was a hell of a hobo, man. Who am I to judge?
That's right.
Who
He's
am I?
doing push-ups and cardio
Got a
in the
cardio going.
train car
He
going
was about
across
ready
the
to be
nation.
signed with Shaq, dude. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, bikini wax from a boat.
Well, there's been some people that talk a lot about ones that have hardly have any hair, that are almost hairless.
Yeah.
Um,
Bigfoot is nothing but guys that let themselves go. Well, he
right,
might have let
feral
himself,
humans.
but he
In
didn't let
fact,
himself go physically.
that's a lot of the history. If you look back in old, late 1800s, early 1900s uh, encounters. I mean, they made the newspapers, local newspapers. You can go back and find on microfiche, and they talk about the wild man or the hairy man.
The grass man.
Yeah.
Remember, isn't that a Kansas thing or is that Idaho?
Ohio.
Ohio? Yeah, I know it's over
Ohio
in that
grass
ballpark, the Ohio grass man.
man. Yeah.
That's the most similar description I've heard. You know, his ability to squat down in the grass and vanish. Right, he'd just bend down and then wouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah.
This thing could have blended into anything at all. Something about the interaction of his hair color and his shape, just as soon as he hit natural color again, like oak leaves and trees and stuff, gone. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know, cheesy. I don't know. Yeah, you. Any of your brothers been in Georgia drinking out of swamps with no clothes on? Like, dude, I was out there, man. I was out there. Like,
That's what you said. And you said you're out at a spot that had the big hole in it.
yeah, well, there's sinkholes there. We have this. I'm in the Piedmont area, and around here there are a double handful of lime sinks and limestone caves and stuff, and that runs all out under the town I'm living in right now, and all out under the swamps around it and stuff. And back in the
Well,
50s,
that
60s, the Army Corps of Engineers come through and blew up all of them to make them safe for people to not go into them. Basically,
right.
still a handful open, but the ones out there were never caved in and are mostly
Yeah.
underwater because of beaver dams and stuff. So
Well,
if you didn't
Native
know it was
American.
there, you wouldn't know it was there.
Yeah. Well, caves are theorized to be a pretty good place, living spot. Plus, you know, the some of the Native American tribes, kind of call the Bigfoot the brother of the beaver.
Mm.
So there's theorized that they get up underneath riverbanks, up underneath old trees, deadfall trees. You know how you can get back up underneath a root ball of up into the bank or something like that, and dig something back up underneath there.
There's
Um,
another feature I've come across out there that I've never seen anywhere else. And I don't know if it's related or not, but I just haven't seen it in another area. Even if it's a very similar area, I don't see this. Beaver dams in that area have paths across the top of them. You go off to the right, it might be 3 foot deep. You go off to the left, it might be 20 foot deep, depending on how tall the beaver dam is. But the top of the beaver dam will be padded down as if something walks back and forth across it on a regular. There'll be grass on both sides of it, but not right down the middle. And while animals could do that, I don't know why they would.
Now, when have you seen that?
But the oak pine, which mill pine. I mean, there's a few specific beaver dams I'm speaking of, but it's generally between here and the Oconee River. There's a few of them down that it's kind of like steps. You know, they you got this one up here near the road, and then the next one will be 3 5 foot lower, and the next one will be they might be 100 yards away, 300 yards away, quarter mile further downstream. But it's far enough away that these beavers and these beavers don't cross territory. And this one might not have a trail on it, and that one down there might not have a trail on it. This one here does. And wherever that happens, two things seem to be relatively common. junipers, for some strange reason, pop up on the ones that have the flat tops, and like plum trees and gooseberries both grow. Huckleberries is another one. They grow both sides of those particular
Oh yeah.
things, and I've always figured it was animals and stuff. Although it always struck me as odd that that one's bigger, wider, and more stable, but they don't use it. This one over here is a shorter distance to cross, but they don't use it. Instead, they use this one that actually has 3 points that it goes to, which I know that doesn't make any sense. You'd have to see it for it to make sense, but it's basically three different beaver dams joined across the tops of three different, what I guess would be hilltops or islands if it was just flat water, you know. And there'll be like a patch of trees here and a patch of trees there and a patch of trees there, and the beavers will build the dam kind of in a clover shape, kind of right, kind of against the flow of the water, you know.
Right.
There'll be like a spillway area here and a spillway area over there. I think it has something to do with when it floods, these spillway areas naturally break and it lets more water out when it needs to, and then they'll go patch it back up. And I think that whatever it is that crosses there, be it bear, cats, or whatever, can hop across the spillway. They can just step across it. At other dams, you don't know where it would break. So if you were trying to cross and it was a little bit of high water, it might be dangerous. But
Gotcha.
on this particular dam, also this particular dam that I'm speaking about, and I know of two of them that have like a path like this. But this one in particular is actually partly on top of an old mill race, like 215 years old. It's buried under the dam, under all of that. So previously, 150, 200 years ago, you would have been able to walk across a man-made dam right there. To make of that what you will. Animals with force of habit or something. I don't know.
Right. Right.
They learned it somewhere, I guess. They could go over here and get across with their feet dry, no problem. They could go over there and go a much shorter distance. But this one is a little complicated, but they take it. Why? Well, over to here used to didn't be underwater. And from here to here didn't used to be underwater. It wasn't until the beaver dams buried the mill dam under their own dam that this became navigable or became unnavigable, right? That's when it flooded the rest of that mill pond out. The mill pond's a good 8 feet below the surface of that beaver pond. And heck, it's probably completely filled up by now, just about it. There's an old millstone and all kinds of stuff out there under the water. You find all kinds of crazy old stuff like musket balls and yeah, Harris, you go ahead, brother. I appreciate you being here, man. Yeah, sure. Maybe they do wander out there to go catch food, but it was always the fruits and the weird selection of trees that would grow out there, and the fact that they do not grow directly in the middle of the dam. They always grow on the downhill side of the dam. That makes sense if whatever was dropped on top washed over.
True.
See what I'm saying? So
Yep.
I don't know what's doing it. It could be ducks. It could be geese. It could be any number of other things that's dropping the fruit. I mean, who knows? But something that eats plums and eats gooseberries and eats huckleberries. And around here, I don't know if you're familiar with huckleberries. You ever heard of a huckleberry?
Yeah.
Okay. Around here, huckleberries grow 12 foot tall. And the deer eat them at the bottom, and they'll grow like a big mushroom at the top and then hang down, and you can walk around and pick huckleberries above your head. And me, I'm 6 foot tall. I reach up to pick huckleberries. That's a big bush.
Right.
You know, they're not very good to eat. They won't hurt you, but they're not terribly tasty. I used to love them though. I don't know why, because they look like a blueberry, maybe.
You ever find any tracks out there?
Nothing that I would have looked at and said that's Bigfoot. It was always a barefooted track. And if you come across something, and we had enough youngins running around out there that were 15, 16, 17. Hell, I didn't wear shoes till I was 15. So I mean, hell, I just assume it was my track or one of my brother's tracks or one of my neighbor's tracks. I mean, Pee Wee still don't wear shoes. So I mean, he ain't but
Look,
5 feet
look for
short.
something. Look for something that doesn't have an arch. Look for something that's pretty flat all the way across the foot.
You'd have to have that in your mind to start looking for it, right?
Right.
So, like, when I was growing up, I crawled all over those swamps out there, man. I'm talking
Sure.
the property right behind my house, 242 acres of untracked wilderness that had never been cut until I was 20. It got clear cut when I was 20, and that was the first time an axe ever went in there, you know? And so if I found tracks out there, and I did find tracks, I assumed it was Pee Wee, or I assumed it was my neighbor, or I assumed it was some other guy that was out there for the same reason. I was barefooted. Why wouldn't they be?
Exactly.
You know, so it just never crossed my mind. Hey, man, do you realize we just did an entire show without having to resort to videos?
Is that a good thing?
That's actually fantastic because every
Good.
video I play is a chance that we get copyrighted.
Oh, right. Right.
Right. So, you know, because I try to limit the amount of songs. I try to eliminate all songs because that's automatic copyright. I've got a few little hinky things I do to try to limit visual copyrights, but it's hit and miss. So, you know, if I mean, yeah, we're fixing to go into the Sasquatch After Dark, and I'm gonna throw the link in the description in the chat over here, and we can stick around. We can do the videos in there, and I'll send you the episode that I've made, and you'll get probably the first person to get a completely clean episode. I think Mandatory Carry got one. He did the same thing. He sat and talked for almost an hour straight with no problem.
Actually, I've got another show that I
Okay,
moderate on that started at well, I've missed about a half hour of it, but I got to jump over to that actually.
go for it. Go for it.
But hey, I really appreciate you bringing me on, and I'll look for some other people that might have some different content on here too. That
Yeah, man. I'm sorry I didn't get to your videos. I was gonna bring up the owl one. I'm gonna let it play. We'll do some sounds at least. 'Cause I really like this one. Or maybe we won't. Why is it not doing it? We're not hearing anything, are we?
there it goes.
Oh, okay. Come on, man. Huh. Let one of them let out on you right above your head.
Yeah, I do some recording out there too, and I picked up some hogs like drinking water, like right next to
That's
where my
cool.
recorder was, and everything sniffing and making
Right.
slurping sounds. Coyotes. Um, yeah, it's a really fertile little area out there.
I dig it. I'd love to go out camping out there, man. Spend about a week just wandering around.
Yeah, there's not much right there. That's about as most of the trees that are there you're seeing there.
We roll around a spring break, man. I would just check out I'd just check out to the mouth of Buffalo, or I might end up down by Dublin, or I might go as far up as Milledgeville, just wandering along the bank of the river with nobody else around.
Yeah,
A lot of people, a lot
Georgia's
of people
got some
got real
great
scared about being
great
out in the
places.
woods and stuff, and they'd get real upset with me and finding me. Like, we had this game warden out here. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he got so used to finding me out in the middle of nowhere that I don't know that he knew my name. I assume he figured out who I was, but he got so used to finding me out in the middle of nowhere that he'd just wave at me on the way by. He'd be in the boat or he'd be on a four-wheeler or whatever. I mean, I was hand fishing and trapping, so it wasn't like it was anything he could arrest me on. I mean, I
Right.
was literally sustenance traveling, so he could have brought me in on charges if he wanted to, but he'd have to figure out what I was doing. And he'd find me, I'd have two sticks in my pocket and a roll of string, like, what are you going to get me for, boss?
All right.
Eating? Good luck. I'm 12. What are you going to do? You can blame my parents for not keeping watch on me, but if you knew where I lived, it would make more sense for me to be here, right?
Yeah,
Man.
that's.
All right, man. I'll let you go. I'm sorry. I'm holding you up.
Oh no, don't
You do your
sweat it.
thing.
I appreciate it.
It's been
And
tons of fun. When I get my sound fixed up and we can have actually a cleaner run, I'll invite you back through.
cool, cool.
All right.
Hopefully, I'll have
Maybe
some
you can
more
bring us.
content by then too.
Yes, sir. Go. Yeah, man. Hey, go get me some cool animals.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
Yep.
All right, man. I'm gonna
Peace out.
jump off here.
Don't let the man get you down.
I'll try not to.
Thank you, sir. All right, folks. That is largely the end of the typical show.